Sabine Richter never imagined that accepting an invitation to a wedding in Egypt would change her life forever. At 52, this retired nurse from Dusseldorf had devoted 3 decades to caring for others, sacrificing her own dreams of traveling the world. After her divorce was finalized 2 years ago, she finally felt free to explore the destinations she had only ever seen in travel magazines. I finally had the chance to live for myself. These were the words Sabine repeated to her friends whenever she talked about her new plans. After 25 years of marriage to Klaus, a strict accountant who considered international travel a waste of money, she was determined to enjoy her newfound freedom. The divorce had been bitter but fair. She kept the house in Oberkassel and a considerable amount of the shared retirement fund. The invitation came through Fatima, a 28-year-old Egyptian woman whom Sabine had met 3 months earlier in a Facebook group called German Women Traveling in Egypt. Fatima introduced herself as a tour guide in Cairo, fluent in German and specializing in showing the real Egypt to European visitors. Her photos showed a beautiful young woman, always smiling, posing alongside satisfied tourists in front of the pyramids. "My dear Sabine," Fatima wrote in near-perfect German, "I invite you to something very special." The invitation was tempting. Her cousin Ahmed's wedding in Luxor, a traditional 3-day Egyptian celebration that tourists rarely have the opportunity to witness. "You will experience true Egyptian culture," Fatima promised, assuring Sabine that she would be treated like family. What made the offer irresistible were the carefully planned details. Fatima had researched Sabine's social media profile. She knew of her interest in ancient history, her passion for photography, and her recent separation. "After everything you've been through, you deserve a magical trip," she wrote in one of the many private messages they exchanged. Sabine, who had casually mentioned in a post that she felt lost after her divorce, found an attentive listener in Fatima. The young Egyptian always responded quickly, offering words of encouragement and sharing stories about how other German women had found new life after visiting Egypt. "The land of the pharaohs heals broken hearts," Fatima would say with a poetry that touched Sabine deeply. The conversations quickly evolved from tourism to personal confidences. Fatima seemed genuinely interested in Sabine's life, asking about her career as a nurse, her adult children who lived in other cities, and especially her financial situation after the divorce. "You are a strong woman," she constantly praised. "You deserve all the good things in life." When Fatima finally made the official invitation to the wedding, she included all the details that a careful person like Sabine would need. The flight would be paid for by the groom's family, a tradition, she explained. She would stay at the family home in Luxor, and she would have an authentic experience that no hotel could offer. "You will be like my German sister," Fatima promised. Sabine carefully researched trips to Egypt, read forms by German women who had visited the country, and even consulted her doctor about necessary vaccinations. Everything seemed legitimate. Fatima had sent photos of the family, the house where Sabine would be staying, and even a video of the bride showing the wedding preparations. Sabine's friends had mixed opinions. Petra, her best friend of 20 years, thought the trip was adventurous but exciting. Ingrid, always more cautious, asked uncomfortable questions. "How well do you know this Fatima?" But Sabine was determined. "I'm 52, not 25, she argued. "I can take care of myself." What Sabine didn't know was that Fatima had been studying her profile thoroughly for weeks. The young Egyptian woman knew exactly where Sabine worked, knew the names of her children, Thomas and Lisa, knew about the inheritance left by her mother 2 years earlier, and most importantly, had identified all the signs of emotional vulnerability she looked for in her potential victims. Fatima was also not who she claimed to be. Her real name was Noor Hassan, 31. And she was part of an organized network that had perfected the process of identifying, attracting, and exploiting European women in emotionally vulnerable situations. The Facebook group was a hunting tool run by 5 people who took turns creating fake profiles and establishing relationships with potential targets. The family that appeared in the photos was real, but it was not Fatima's family. The images had been collected from the social media profiles of people who did not even know their photos were being used in criminal schemes. The wedding in Luxor did exist, but it was not the intimate family event that had been promised to Sabine. 3 days before the trip, Fatima sent an urgent message. Sabine, my dear, there's been a small change of plans due to family issues. She explained the wedding had been moved to a smaller town called Esna, about 50 kilometers south of Luxor. It will be even more authentic, she assured her. Fewer tourists, more tradition. Sabine, with her bags already packed and her documents organized, saw no problem with the change. In fact, the prospect of an even more authentic experience thrilled her. She photographed her passport and sent it via WhatsApp to Thomas, her son, with the message, "Your mother is finally taking her dream trip." On the morning of the flight, March 15th, Sabine woke up at 4 a.m. She put on her most comfortable clothes for the 6-hour trip to Cairo. Dark jeans, a light blue cotton blouse, and her favorite wool coat. At Düsseldorf Airport, she took a selfie in the departure area and posted it on Facebook. Finally, Egypt. Here I come. What Sabine couldn't have imagined was that this photo would be one of the last images of her smiling that her friends and family would see for the next 3 months, and that Fatima at that very moment was sending a message to her accomplices. The German is arriving today. Everything is ready. Lufthansa flight LH582 landed at Cairo International Airport at 2:30 p.m. local time, just 20 minutes late. Sabine Richter looked out the window at the arid landscape stretching beyond the runway, feeling a mixture of anxiety and excitement. During the flight, she had meticulously read her Lonely Planet travel guide and reviewed the basic Arabic phrases she had jotted down on her cell phone. Shukran, thank you. Marhaba, hello. I don't speak Arabic. In the last 3 days before the trip, she had exchanged constant messages with Fatima, who seemed even more excited than she was. I can't wait to meet you, my German sister, she had written the day before. The plan was simple. Fatima would meet her at the exit of the international arrivals area, holding a sign with the name Sabine Richter, "Welcome to Egypt," and then they would go directly to Luxor, where they would spend the first night before, continuing on to Esna after, passing through immigration and customs without any problems. The Egyptian official even smiled when he saw her. Tourist visa. Sabine emerged in the arrivals area, looking for Fatima. The crowd was intense, with dozens of people holding signs in Arabic, English, and other languages she couldn't identify. Taxi drivers constantly approached her. Taxi, taxi, where are you going? After 20 minutes of searching, she began to worry. She tried to call Fatima, but the call went straight to voicemail. She sent messages on WhatsApp. Fatima, I'm here. Where are you? The messages showed only one check mark, indicating that they had not been delivered. That's when a friendly-looking young man, around 25 years old, approached her, speaking German with a strong accent. Excuse me, are you Sabine? He introduced himself as Omar, Fatima's cousin. Fatima had to rush to the hospital, he explained with a worried expression. Her mother got sick. She sent me to pick you up. Sabine felt a tightness in her chest. Is she very ill? She asked, genuinely concerned. Omar shook his head sadly. Very ill? Yes, but Fatima said the wedding is still on. The family's waiting for you in Esna. The story made sense, and Omar seemed to know details about her that only Fatima could have shared. He mentioned that she was a retired nurse from Düsseldorf, that she had recently divorced, and even knew that she loved photography. Fatima tells me everything about her German sister, he said with a warm smile. Omar explained that they would drive directly to Esna, where the family was waiting. The trip would take about 8 hours, but he knew some interesting stops along the way. You will see the real Egypt, he promised, echoing Fatima's words, Omar's. Car was a relatively new white sedan with air conditioning that worked well, a relief in the March heat of Cairo. He put Sabine's luggage in the trunk and insisted that she sit in the front seat to get a better view of the landscape. You are our guest, he said constantly. We treat German guests like queens. During the first 2 hours of the trip, Omar was the perfect tour guide. He pointed out historical monuments, explained Egyptian traditions, and even stopped at smaller tourist spots so Sabine could take pictures. He photographed her in front of an ancient mosque and even taught her a few words in Arabic. You learn fast, he praised when she managed to pronounce welcome. What caught Sabine's attention were the personal questions Omar asked, always in a natural way during conversations. He wanted to know about her retirement. How much do retired German nurses earn? About her house in Düsseldorf. Is it big, valuable? And especially about her children? Do they visit you often? Do they know where you are? When they stopped for dinner at a small restaurant in Minya, Omar insisted on paying for everything. You are our guest, he repeated, but then casually asked, did you bring money for gifts for the family? German women love to give gifts, don't they? Sabine mentioned that she had brought $500 in cash for gifts and expenses, in addition to credit cards for emergencies. It was during dinner that Sabine began to notice small inconsistencies. Omar sometimes got confused about details of Fatima's mother's illness. First he said she was in the hospital with heart problems. Then he mentioned a fall at home. When Sabine asked which hospital, Omar hesitated before answering, Al-Salam Hospital. After dinner, when they returned to the car, Sabine noticed that Omar was speaking quickly on the phone in Arabic, his voice tense and urgent. When she asked if it was about Fatima's mother, he just nodded and changed the subject. The second half of the trip was different. Omar was quieter, answering questions with monosyllables. The car took a side road that was not on the map Sabine had studied. When she questioned it, Omar explained that it was a shortcut to avoid Luxor traffic. Around 10 p.m. they arrived at what Omar said was Esna, but the city did not look like the photos Fatima had sent. There were no historic buildings as promised, only simple houses on poorly lit streets. Esna is bigger than you think, Omar explained. This is the new part of town. The house where they stopped was a simple 2-story building with concrete walls painted a faded beige. At the gate, 2 women dressed in dark veils were waiting for them. Omar introduced them as Aunt Amira and Aunt Khadija, but they barely looked at Sabine and spoke only Arabic to each other. Where is Fatima? Asked Sabine, growing increasingly uncomfortable. She'll come tomorrow morning, replied Omar. Now you need to rest. It's been a long journey. The room they showed her was on the 2nd floor, a small space with a simple bed, an old wardrobe, and a window with metal bars. For your safety, Omar explained when Sabine questioned the bars. It's not safe here at night. When Omar said goodbye, he told her he would return in the morning with Fatima. Sleep well, Sabine. Tomorrow the real adventure begins. But something in his tone of voice sounded more threatening than friendly. Alone in the room, Sabine tried again to call Fatima, but there was no cell phone signal. The Wi-Fi that Omar had promised didn't work. She heard the 2 women talking in Arabic downstairs, their voices occasionally rising as if they were arguing. Around midnight, Sabine heard the front door slam shut, followed by the sound of a car driving away. When she looked out the barred window, she saw Omar driving toward the main road. The lights in the house went out, and she realized she was alone with 2 strangers who didn't speak German, in a place she couldn't locate on a map with no communication with the outside world. What have I done? She whispered to herself, feeling the first chill of real fear. For the first time since arriving in Egypt, Sabine began to wonder if she had made a terrible mistake. Sabine Richter woke up on her 3rd day in Egypt with the disturbing feeling that something was fundamentally wrong. She had slept poorly during the night, waking up several times to strange noises, footsteps in the hallway, voices whispering in Arabic, and the sound of cars arriving and departing. Each time she tried to listen more closely, silence returned, making her wonder if she was being paranoid. The morning brought more confusion rather than answers. Aunt Amira, one of the women who had welcomed her the night before, brought her strong black coffee and flatbread for breakfast. When Sabine asked, "Where is Fatima?" in basic German mixed with gestures, Amira just shook her head and repeated words in Arabic that she didn't understand. Around 10 a.m., Omar finally appeared, but not with Fatima. His demeanor was noticeably different from the day before, less warm, more formal. Fatima is still in the hospital, he explained quickly, avoiding direct eye contact. Her mother is very, very sick. She may die. Sabine expressed her condolences and offered her help. As a nurse, perhaps she could help in some way. Omar seemed to consider for a moment, then shook his head. You are a tourist, not a doctor. It's different here. Most unsettling were the constant changes in plans. The wedding, Omar now said, had been postponed for 3 days due to the family emergency. But you stay here, he insisted. The family wants to meet you. It would be rude to leave. When Sabine suggested that it might be better to return to Cairo and wait in a hotel until the situation was resolved, Omar became visibly agitated. No, that would be a great insult to the family. They have prepared so much for your visit." To distract her, Omar offered a tour of the city. But when they left, Sabine realized they were not in Esna, as he had claimed. She asked several people on the street in basic English what the name of the city was. The answers confused her even more. Some said Kamambo, others just shook their heads, not understanding. During the sightseeing tour, Omar took her to some minor historical sites, but always in a hurry, not allowing her to talk much with other people, especially other tourists. When she tried to ask a group of German tourists for information at an ancient temple, Omar quickly intervened, saying they were untrustworthy people. It was at this point that Sabine began to notice a disturbing pattern. Omar always knew where she was. When she tried to go to the bathroom alone in a cafe, he showed up minutes later looking for her. When she said she wanted to buy postcards in a store, he insisted on accompanying her and staying by her side throughout the transaction. Omar's questions also became more intrusive and specific. He wanted to know exact numbers, how much money she had brought with her, what her credit card limits were, how much her house in Dusseldorf was worth. "Fatima wants to know," he explained. "She's planning a surprise for you." When Sabine mentioned that she wanted to call her children to tell them about the trip, Omar said that the local telephone system was having problems. "It will work again tomorrow," he promised. But when she tried to use her cell phone discreetly, she discovered that not only was there no signal, but the battery was running out quickly, and Omar had forgotten to bring the charger he had promised. Back at the house in the late afternoon, Sabine noticed more inconsistencies. The two women, who were supposedly Fatima's aunts, treated Omar with a formality that did not fit with a family relationship. They addressed him as Professor Sir, a term of respect that relatives rarely use among themselves. Even more disturbing, during dinner, when she thought no one was paying attention, Sabine heard one of the women refer to her in Arabic as the rich German. She had learned these basic words in her preparatory course for the trip and realized that she was not being treated as a guest of honor, but as something very different. That night, Sabine decided to test the waters. She told Omar that she was feeling ill and needed to go to the hospital. His reaction was revealing. Instead of showing concern, he seemed irritated and nervous. "German women are always sick," he muttered, then said that there were no good hospitals in the area and that she would feel better after a good night's sleep. When she insisted that she needed medical attention, Omar became more direct. "You're not going anywhere until Fatima arrives." It was the first time he had used a tone that brooked no argument. Alone in her room again, Sabine began to connect the disturbing dots. The marriage that had brought her there seemed not to exist. Fatima, who had been her only source of information about the entire trip, remained mysteriously absent. Omar knew intimate details about her financial life that could only have come from prior investigation. And now she was clearly being prevented from leaving. She tried to remember exactly what she had shared with Fatima during their weeks of online conversation. With horror, she realized that she had mentioned not only her financial resources, but also details about her routine in Dusseldorf. The fact that her children lived far away and rarely visited her, and especially that no one expected to hear from her during the first week of her trip. "I'm not here as a guest," she whispered to herself in the dark. "I'm here as what?" The word she didn't want to admit was clear in her mind. Prisoner. Around 2 a.m., she heard voices downstairs. Not just the two women and Omar, but other male voices she didn't recognize. They spoke in Arabic, but occasionally she heard words in English. Money, passport, Germany, her passport. With panic, she realized that Omar had kept it for safety on the first day, and she hadn't thought to ask for it back. Without her passport, she was effectively trapped in the country. The reality of her situation began to crystallize. She was not in Egypt as a tourist invited to a wedding. She was there as the victim of an elaborate scheme, and the people around her were not her hosts but her captors. The terrible question that kept her awake for the rest of the night was, what exactly did they plan to do with her? The fourth day in Egypt brought a revelation that would forever change Sabine Richter's understanding of her situation. She woke up early around 5:30 a.m. to the sound of a heated argument downstairs. Male voices spoke in Arabic in a clearly irritated tone, and she could distinguish Omar's voice among them. Curiously, one of the voices spoke in broken German, and Sabine was able to catch a few phrases. "She's too old. She's not what we ordered. This is going to cause problems. Around 8 a.m., Omar came up to her room with a more serious expression than on previous days. Sabine, he said without his usual pleasantries, we need to talk. For the first time, he sat down in the only chair in the room, assuming a posture that indicated a long and serious conversation. Fatima isn't coming today, he began. And when Sabine was about to protest, he raised his hand to silence her. Fatima doesn't exist, he continued in careful German. I am Fatima. I was the one who wrote to you. The initial shock gave way to confusion. What did he mean? He was Fatima, Omar explained patiently. He had created Fatima's profile, used photos of a cousin who lived in Cairo, and spent months chatting with German women in Facebook groups. You weren't the first, he said without apparent emotion, and you won't be the last. Sabine felt the world spinning around her. What do you want from me? She managed to ask. Omar sighed as if the question were irrelevant. At first we just wanted your money, he explained. German women always have a lot of money. But then he paused. Then other plans came along. What other plans? Sabine's voice was trembling. There are men here, Omar continued. Rich men who, how to put it, have special desires. They pay very well for German women, especially older ones whom no one will miss. The horror of what Omar was implying hit Sabine like a physical punch. You want to sell me? She managed to whisper. Sell is a nasty word, Omar replied calmly. You'll have a new life with a rich man who will take care of you. You said yourself that you were lonely. Sabine stood up abruptly, feeling nauseous. I want to go home right now. Omar remained seated, calm. That's no longer possible, Sabine. You're not going anywhere. I have rights. I'm a German citizen. Your rights don't matter here, Omar replied, his voice taking on a harder tone. And besides, no one knows where you are. Your children think you're on vacation. Your friends aren't expecting to hear from you for weeks. It was true. Sabine had told everyone she would be offline for a week to really experience the local culture. No one would expect to hear from her until at least the end of the following week. Omar stood up and walked to the window. Someone is coming to see you this afternoon, he announced. His name is Mahmoud. He's very wealthy. He has businesses in Alexandria. He's looking for a companion. A companion? Sabine repeated, even though she knew exactly what that meant. You'll be nice to him, Omar continued. You'll smile. You'll show him you're a good German woman. If he likes you, you'll go with him. And if I say no? Omar turned to face her directly. For the first time, she saw something cold and calculating in his eyes. That's not an option, Sabine. After Omar left, locking the door behind him, Sabine sat on the bed, trembling. Everything was clear now. She had been lured into a human trafficking network that specifically targeted vulnerable German women. The psychological profile that Fatima Omar had built of her was perfect. Divorced, lonely, no close family ties, financially well off, and desperate for a new life. She remembered the seemingly innocent questions Fatima had asked her over the months about her loneliness. How often she was in touch with her children, her financial resources, her travel plans. Each answer had been carefully cataloged and analyzed. Around noon, the two women brought her different clothes, a more fitted dress, makeup, and even cheap perfume. When Sabine refused to get dressed, one of them, taller and stronger, made it clear through gestures that this was not a suggestion. At 3 p.m., she heard a car pulling up. Male voices chatted downstairs, then footsteps climbing the stairs. When the door opened, Omar entered, accompanied by a man in his 60s, well-dressed with gray hair and an expression that assessed Sabine as if she were merchandise. This is Sabine, Omar said in Arabic, then addressed her in German. This is Mr. Mahmoud. Mahmoud approached, examining her with experienced eyes. He spoke surprisingly fluent German. You are older than I expected, he said bluntly. But German women age well. He walked around her as if inspecting a product. Are you healthy? Do you have any illnesses? Sabine was paralyzed by shock and fear. Mahmoud interpreted her silence as shyness. Well, I like shy women, he commented to Omar. She'll learn how to behave. She's very obedient, Omar lied. A good German housewife. She knows how to cook, clean, and she was a nurse. A nurse? Mahmoud's interest visibly increased. That's very useful. My mother is sick and needs care. He turned to Sabine. You'll take care of my mother, won't you? When Sabine didn't answer, Mahmoud frowned. Doesn't she speak? She's just nervous, Omar quickly explained. New situation, you know. Mahmoud nodded understandingly, then addressed Sabine directly. Listen, Mrs. Sabine, I'm a good man. I'll treat you well. You'll have a nice house, nice clothes, good food. All you have to do is be a good woman. I want to go home, Sabine finally managed to whisper. Mahmoud laughed. Germany is cold and lonely, he said. Here you have sunshine family, a man who takes care of you. Why would you want to go back to nothing? The coldness with which he reduced her entire life to nothing was devastating to Sabine. How much? Mahmoud asked Omar in English. 15,000 $, Omar replied in the same language. She's old. 10,000 $, she's German, educated, a nurse. 12,000 $, 11,000 $, final. Omar nodded. They were negotiating her price as if she were an object. Mahmoud turned to Sabine one last time. I'll come back tomorrow to pick her up, he announced. Get ready, your new life begins. After he left, Omar remained in the room. You're lucky, he said. Mahmoud is rich. You'll be fine. How can you do this? Sabine asked, tears finally streaming down her face. I'm a human being, not a thing. You were already nothing in Germany, Omar replied emotionlessly. Divorced, lonely, forgotten by your children. Here, at least you'll be needed. My children will look for me. Will they? Omar tilted his head. When was the last time you spoke to Thomas? 3 weeks ago, and Lisa, a month ago. He knew the intimate details of her life better than she realized. They'll think you're enjoying your vacation. The painful truth of Omar's words hit Sabine hard. Her adult children had their own lives, busy careers, relationships. They really wouldn't expect frequent contact during her adventurous vacation. Why me? She asked. You were perfect, Omar explained almost proudly. Vulnerable, but not penniless. Lonely, but not desperate. Old enough to be grateful. Young enough to be useful. He had studied psychology to find ideal victims. How many others? You're the 7th German woman this year, Omar admitted. But the others were more cooperative. What happened to them? They're living their new lives now, he replied vaguely. Some are happy, others, he shrugged. Others are learning to be happy. That night was the worst of Sabine's life. She fully understood her situation. She was being sold to a man who would see her as property. No rescue was coming. No one was looking for her, and she was in a country where she didn't know the laws, didn't speak the language, and had no allies. Even more terrifying, she realized that Omar and his network had done this many times before. They had perfected the process of identifying, luring, capturing, and selling European women. She was not the first, and she certainly would not be the last. For the first time since arriving in Egypt, Sabine began to plan her escape. But how could she escape when she was in unfamiliar territory, without documents, without money, and surrounded by people who saw her as merchandise? The 5th day dawned with Sabine Richter in a state of controlled panic. During her sleepless night, she had obsessively analyzed every detail of her situation, looking for any possibility of escape before Mahmoud returned to pick her up. The reality was devastating. No passport, no money. Omar had kept her euros for safety. No knowledge of the local area and no Arabic language skills. Around 7 a.m., one of the women, Amira, brought her the usual breakfast, flatbread and strong tea. But this time, Sabine paid attention to details she had ignored before. Amira carried an old cell phone that she kept in her dress pocket. More importantly, she had left the bedroom door ajar, something that hadn't happened since the first day. Sabine decided to try a different approach. Instead of acting like a terrified victim, she would try to gain some trust. When Amira returned, to collect the empty plate, Sabine smiled and said, "Shukran," thank you, in Arabic, one of the few words she knew. Amira looked surprised but responded with a nod. Encouraged, Sabine pointed to herself and said, "Sabine," then pointed questioningly at Amira. "Amira," the woman replied with a small smile. "Amira, children," Sabine tried in basic English, gesturing. To her surprise, Amira replied in broken English, "Yes, 3 children, boys." This small human connection gave Sabine an idea. Over the next few hours, she worked to establish some kind of relationship with Amira. She showed her photos of her own children that she had in her wallet. Omar had returned only the wallet, keeping the passport and money. Amira showed her photos of her children on her old cell phone. "You, a good mother," Sabine said in simplified English, pointing to the photos. "I, mother too. Very sad, very afraid." Something in Amira's face changed. She looked at Sabine for a long moment, then glanced nervously at the door. "You don't tell Omar," she whispered. And for the first time, Sabine saw compassion in her eyes. Around noon, Omar appeared with more clothes, a more formal blue dress, and heeled sandals. "You need to get ready," he announced. "Mahmoud arrives at 4 p.m. Please, Omar." Sabine tried to appeal to whatever humanity might remain in him. "You have a family. How would you feel if someone did this to your sister?" "My sister isn't stupid enough to travel alone to Egypt," Omar replied coldly. "You make stupid choices. You bear the consequences." But when Omar left, Sabine noticed that he hadn't locked the door completely. There was a small crack. It was the first time in 5 days that this had happened. Coincidence? Or maybe a mirror had said something? Around 2 p.m., Sabine heard several male voices downstairs, including a heated argument between Omar and another man. She could make out a few words in English: police, asking questions, and German embassy. And very careful. Her heart raced. Could it be that someone was looking for her? Maybe her children had become worried. Or perhaps the German police had discovered the scheme. At 3:30 p.m., a half an hour before Mahmoud's expected arrival, something unexpected happened. Amira rushed into the room, glanced nervously behind her, and then whispered urgently, "You run now. Omar gone. Men talking. Trouble for you. Run." "Where to?" Sabine whispered back. Amira pointed to the window. "Road there. Walk to big street. Find police. Tell them. Say you lost. My passport. No passport. Just run now." The urgency in Amira's voice was real. Amira then did something Sabine would never forget. She took off her own veil and handed it to her. "Cover head. You look like an Egyptian woman. Go." Without thinking twice, Sabine covered her head with the veil, said a quick "Shukran," "Shukriya," thank you to Amira, and headed for the window. The bars she had thought were for her safety actually had a loose section. Amira had worked to loosen them. From the second floor, there was a steep but possible descent across the roof of an adjacent building. Sabine, despite her 52 years and paralyzing fear, found a strength she didn't know she possessed. She managed to climb down from the roof into a narrow alley behind the house. She could hear male voices arguing inside the house, but she couldn't tell if they had noticed her escape. Following Amira's instructions, she walked quickly toward what appeared to be a main street. The veil and her attempt to walk like an Egyptian woman worked partially. She didn't attract immediate attention, but she was lost, terrified, and didn't know where to go. After about 20 minutes of walking, she saw something that made her cry with relief. A police car parked in front of a small market. 2 uniformed police officers were talking to the store owner. "Police, help me," she shouted in English, running toward them. The officers turned around, surprised. "English tourist?" one of them asked. "German? German," Sabine said, removing her veil to reveal her clearly European face. "Kidnapped! Help!" What she didn't know was that at that very moment, an international investigation was already underway. The German Foreign Ministry had been alerted by relatives of other German women who had disappeared in Egypt, and Interpol was tracking a pattern of disappearances linked to Facebook groups that targeted vulnerable German women. Her escape had not only come at the right time for her, it had come at the perfect time to expose the entire criminal network that had been operating for years in the Nile Valley. Sabine Richter's rescue on the afternoon of March 19th triggered one of the largest anti-trafficking operations in Egypt's recent history. What began as the case of a lost German tourist quickly turned into an international investigation that would uncover a criminal network that had been operating for at least 5 years. Luxor Police Commander Ahmed Farouk would later describe that day as a watershed moment in our fight against international human trafficking. When Sabine was brought to the police station, the officer's initial skepticism, after all, lost tourists were common, quickly turned to shock as she began to describe her experience. She wasn't simply lost, Farouk would explain in later interviews. She described a systematic scheme with multiple perpetrators, forged documents, and what appeared to be an established commercial operation. The first important discovery came when Sabine mentioned the name Omar and described the house where she had been held. The local police knew the area. They had received several complaints from neighbors about strange activity at the property, including foreign women being seen occasionally, but always with male relatives who did not allow conversation. When the police arrived at the house 3 hours after Sabine's escape, they found evidence that confirmed their worst fears. Omar, whose real name was Khalil Hassan Abdalrahman, 34, had fled, but he left behind a laptop containing a veritable library of information about European women. What we found was shocking, reported Special Investigator Youssef Mansour. Detailed profiles of hundreds of German, Austrian, and Dutch women, saved Facebook conversations, amateur psychological analyses, and even market value assessments based on age, financial status, and family ties. The laptop revealed that the network operated under the name Desert Rose Tourism, a fictitious company that was never formally registered, but maintained a sophisticated online presence. They had created multiple female identities on social media, each with elaborate backstories, photos stolen from real profiles, and personalities designed to attract different types of victims. Fatima was just one of at least 12 fake identities. There was also Yasmin, who specialized in attracting women interested in adventure and spirituality, Noor, who focused on recent widows, and Amina, who targeted professional women in career transition. The investigation revealed that Sabine had been the 23rd documented victim of the network in the last 3 years. Of the previous 22, 11 had been sold to men in various parts of Egypt and neighboring countries. 8 had managed to escape or been released after their families paid a ransom, and 3 remained missing. Mahmoud El-Hatib, the man who had bought Sabine, was arrested at his home in Alexandria the following day. At his home, police found 2 other European women, Maria Santos, 47, a Portuguese woman who had been married to him for 8 months, and Jennifer Walsh, 55, an English woman who had arrived 3 weeks earlier. Both women were in a state of psychological shock, reported social worker Fatma Al-Zahra, who worked with the victims. They had been conditioned to believe that they had no choice, that their families did not want them back, and that resistance would result in terrible consequences. The network was more sophisticated than initially imagined. It operated on 3 levels: hunters like Omar who identified and lured victims online, processors who kept the women during the preparation period, and distributors who made the connection with end buyers. Parallel investigations in Germany conducted by the BKA, Federal Criminal Police Office, revealed that the network had meticulously studied German society to identify vulnerabilities. They knew about the high divorce rates, the isolation of many elderly people, the difficulties of reintegration after retirement, and even patterns of behavior on social media that indicated emotional susceptibility. They were criminals, but they were also very competent amateur psychologists, noted Dr. Klaus Weber, a criminologist at Heidelberg University who studied the case. They understood that loneliness and the need for human connection could be turned into weapons. The legal process was complex, involving multiple jurisdictions. Omar was captured a week later at the Libyan border, attempting to flee to territory where it would be more difficult to extradite him. Mahmoud and 5 other members of the network received sentences ranging from 15 to 25 years in prison. More important than the arrests were the systemic changes that the case brought about. The Egyptian government, under significant international pressure, implemented new protocols to monitor suspicious activities involving tourists, especially women traveling alone. Border police received special training to identify potential victims of trafficking. For Sabine, her return to Germany on March 25th was only the beginning of a long recovery process. She is not the same woman who traveled to Egypt, her daughter Lisa noted in one of the few interviews the family has given. But she is also stronger in some ways. Sabine decided to use her experience to educate others. She worked with organizations combating human trafficking to develop awareness campaigns targeting vulnerable German women. "If my story saves another woman," she said, "then this nightmare was not in vain." The case also prompted changes on social media platforms. Facebook and Instagram implemented new algorithms to detect patterns of behavior consistent with online predators, especially those targeting specific demographics with offers of travel or romance. Amira, the woman who helped Sabine escape, was placed in a witness protection program and eventually received asylum in Germany with her 3 children. She has become an important advocate in the fight against human trafficking, working especially to protect Egyptian women who may be coerced into participating in these schemes. Often, Amira explained in court testimony, we are also victims. They tell us that European women are happy, that we are helping them find love. Only later do we realize the truth, the final. Investigation revealed that the network had moved approximately 2.3 million over 5 years selling women for prices ranging from $5,000 to $25,000, depending on their age, education, and perceived financial resources. 3 years later, Sabine is still in therapy, but she has also become a respected speaker on travel safety and online predation. Her case continues to be studied in police academies and criminology courses as a classic example of how emotional vulnerability can be systematically exploited. The most important thing, she said in her most recent lecture, is to understand that loneliness makes us vulnerable. But loneliness is also curable through real connections, not through fantasies that are too good to be true. Sabine Richter may have appeared in the newspapers as a victim, but her courage in escaping and testifying dismantled a network that could have continued to victimize dozens of other women. Her case remains a powerful reminder that even in the most desperate situations, human resilience can prevail, a case that changed everything. The Sabine Richter case became a milestone in the international fight against human trafficking, not only because of its successful resolution, but because of the systemic changes it brought about. 5 years later, it remains a reference in police training, awareness campaigns, and academic studies on online predation. The story of a retired nurse from Düsseldorf who almost became a victim of an international human trafficking network continues to save lives through education, prevention, and the courage of a survivor who turned her trauma into strength to protect others. As the German federal prosecutor said in his final report, "This case has taught us that modern human trafficking does not only take place in dark alleys or distant borders. It happens on our computers, on our social networks, taking advantage of the loneliness and vulnerability that can affect anyone. And based on real patterns of international trafficking and online predation techniques documented by Interpol and European agencies fighting organized crime."